Good day, good day. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Jay, and this is Homeschool Yo Kids podcast. Look, before I get started, I'm still new to this, trying to get it together, but please make sure you check out our homeschoolyourkidsexpo.com website to check out all of our touring dates. We have a good 13 expos left, 14 in total, but check it out, coming to a city near you. And major shout out to Classical Conversations, one of our many sponsors. And we have with us Dr. Shaunette today, who is with National School Choice Week Foundation, who is also a major sponsor of Homeschool Your Kids. So I'm so excited. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, well, I am Dr. Shaunette Parker. I'm the Director of Awareness Events for the National School Choice Awareness Foundation. So what else you want me to say about myself? I love talking about education choice, all of the different options. And so with National School Choice Week, one of our big focuses, as many people know, during that last week of January or so, to really just spread awareness about all different education types and making sure parents just know what their options are out there. And so we don't discriminate against any type. We just say we want to point you in the right direction to a good fit. And particularly this year, we've been focusing a lot on homeschool as an option because I think it's a space where people don't talk about it a lot, and particularly in ethnically diverse communities, not feeling like it is an option for them. And so we're really just trying to make sure people understand what's out there. And so working for a National School Choice Awareness Foundation has been fantastic. And so not just National School Choice Week, but we have some other projects in there. So I'm sure as we discuss, I can share with folks out there all of the different resources and things that we have.
Of course, of course. So much, so much. But let's start at the beginning. How did we get
Okay.
here? How did we get to National School Choice Week Awareness Foundation? How did you even what was the journey?
Oh, so for myself, my
Yes,
personal journey.
ma'am.
Ooh, how
Yourself. Yeah.
far back do we go? No, it's
Well,
been
I
real
know you were in
interesting.
the classroom and everything.
Mhm.
So yes, like as far back as you would like to.
Yeah, and I guess for me to really talk about just like how I made it to be in conversation about education choice in this way, I actually got to go back even before I came to South Carolina. So I'm originally from Indiana. And I think for me, honestly, it started in my childhood, like not to sound weird, but I was that kid who had different opportunities outside of school. So even though I went to a traditional public school, the zone schools, the well, honestly, and I guess my parents were using choice illegally back in the day because we used my grandma's address. I mean, but that's what I think people need to realize. That was a lot of choice, and we just didn't know it
Yes,
because
ma'am.
nobody wanted to go to. For us, it was about childcare. We were first living with my grandmother. We moved, but then I was in the same school. My mom didn't want to move me to nothing else, and then my grandmother was the babysitter, so she would drop me off at the grandma's house in the morning anyway. So it just kept like that. And even when my granny passed and my aunt moved into the house, same address. Everybody used that address to go to school. And we didn't want to have to change our school location. And I didn't know that was, I guess, a former choice or trying to do that until I got into the work. But all through school, I growing up in South Bend, Indiana, if you were low income, poor kid, a lot of government programs and different things like that. And so I was one of and Upward Bound, the TRIO programs. I spent my
Mm.
6 weeks on campus at Notre Dame every summer, took college classes, and
Oh
was
wow.
in the group student support services program when I went to college and all these things. And when it was time to go to college, I ended up majoring in telecommunications. I worked in television. I worked at news. I did work for public TV PBS. I produced for a children's TV show for a little while I was in college. But
Oh
then I was
wow.
also, yeah, and it was funny because then all through high school I was interested in broadcast. So we had a little kids cable access TV show called Kids on the Move, and I know it's somewhere out there on the vault, and I'm hosting. And I didn't know how big it was at the time because I was interviewing our city mayor at the time, little 13, 14-year-old me,
Oh
and
my
we out
goodness.
there. And I would have never labeled myself an activist. I would have never labeled myself an advocate or anything at the time. Looking back on it, I guess that's what it was. I mean, we were going to the King Day celebrations, all these things. But when it was time to go into college, I was like, all right, what's going to help me make some money? And I knew, right. And I knew, and I was like, I could, everybody's like, oh, you should be a teacher. You should be a teacher. You'd be great. I love kids. I used to work at the Boys and Girls Clubs, volunteer and all this stuff. I said, well, I think I'm going to go because I really like TV. I'm going to go to school for telecommunications. I minored in Afro studies and theater. And I was like, and I could always teach that if I decided to go into education, but I needed to make a little bit more money. And so that's kind of the path. Went on, graduated, went to work for the NBC affiliate in Indianapolis. I mean, a whole bunch of stuff happened in between there. But the thing that triggered me to say, okay, TV might not necessarily be your path at that time was there was a 5-alarm fire, and the photographers were only worried about going out and getting the video before the fire went out. You know what I mean? And I was just like, but what about the people? That's what I was thinking about. What about the families? I mean, because, when you say 5-alarm, that means you have to call in all these different fire departments to come. And I'm just like, it was like a big apartment building. Literally that week, I went and enrolled in my master's program. And it was actually community psychology. So still not quite in the education space, but I was like, I knew I wanted to work with people, children, families. And so the idea of community psychology was really looking at the whole child, looking at the whole family, how we work with that. And so it started this path of going back into the community center space, doing those things more in the counseling. And then I had an opportunity to work. I was at this point then moved to Indianapolis, right? So I went to school in Bloomington, Indiana, moved to Indianapolis after graduation, was working in a community center. It was great, but then got connected with someone. They're like, hey, we're hiring at this high school. Had never heard of charter schools at the time. And it was a charter high school. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And they were like, we need someone to be their high school to career and college coordinator. And it really fit in line with what community psychology, because the idea of community psychology is that we can't just work with like kids one-on-one. Like that helps and we can counsel them. But when they go back into their environments, if they don't have access to food, if they don't have access to, all these different things, if their families are struggling and working, it's like, no matter what you tell them in terms of how to cope with stress and all these things, their environment is a stressor. So we have to work to change that. And this job at the high school was really about not just supporting children, because it was really for kids who, and you stop me if I'm talking too much, Jay. Listen, because I just go
that's
on
the point of the podcast.
I
That's the point.
know,
No, go ahead. Yes, no, I'm so intrigued. Go, keep going.
But the kid, most of the kids when this charter school first started, and this is true for a lot of charter schools, when they first started, many of them were for kids who were failing in their traditional schools and having some behavior issues and things. And so this school was Indianapolis Metropolitan Career Academy, IndyMet for short. And it was one of Big Picture Learning. And I don't know if folks know about Big Picture schools. They have several of them across the country. They started in Providence, Rhode Island. It's a school where the kids go to are really only in school 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, they're out on internships. 40% of their education is based on the internship. That's like the traditional Big Picture model. I know that things have kind of changed. Yes.
I've never heard of them.
Oh, you have to look into the Big Picture schools. I still love them. They have them from, like I said, from Rhode Island to San Diego in between. They have some in Detroit, all over. And so I'd be happy to kind of pull that up and share where a lot of them are. But the model when it first started, that's what it was. You went to school Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You stayed with the same, they call them advisors. So it wasn't their teacher, and they stayed with the same one for 4 years. So you go in as a freshman, you have a class of advisor, 15 students or so in that class, and you loop through. It wasn't based on the traditional grading level. It was met expectations, exceed expectations. The students have to do exhibitions each quarter to prove that they earn their credits. So it's like they're doing these mini dissertations. They work with their, they call them LTI coordinators, their learning through internship coordinator. And they also, everything that they do in school is based on their interest. So if they want to be a veterinarian, they get an internship at the vet's office, and then their math, science, English, all of that is connected to what they're learning from the vet's office. So it's these real world experiences and things. And so for me, it's a beautiful model.
Are they independent? Are they independently owned, or is this like government wise? Like, how is it?
No, it is independent. It depends on state to state. So Big Picture Learning, the first schools were started, like I said, in Providence, Rhode Island. Many of them are charter schools. Most of them are charter schools now. I don't think that any of them are like private schools. They were all kind of designed to be in that charter model. Now, state to state, It might vary because they have to make adjustments based on the different charter
Mm.
laws in the different states. But I know the one like in Rhode Island, the one in Indianapolis where I worked, it was a charter school. We had to make some adjustments to curriculum based on what the state requirements and things like that, and kind of make that model fit. As their career and college counselor, I had to do like these translations between traditional A, B, C, D grading scale to our grading scale of met expectations, having to really work with college admissions to show them how those things go together. But I would say the majority of them are charter schools. And just like so it depends on the charter law in your state if they require lottery and that kind of thing. I know the model of big picture schools in California looks slightly different, and I think they ended up having to do grades because of the state and how they do things. But it's definitely look into those big picture schools. And I think that's where I really got introduced into the small school movement, because at the time they were heavily funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And they had also then provided a grant to start this other initiative. And so as I was the career and college counselor with IndyMet, and just I fall into my work. I do the best that I can. I try to make it my own. And so, the creativity is exploding, and how can we make a real college counseling program? Because that's where I started to bring in my work with community psychology and understanding. And this particular school, though, was all about what we called wraparound services. So it was like a living community psychology model. So not only did they have an internship coordinator, not only did they have me as a career and college counselor and helping them transition, and then building in alumni services, they had someone who was specifically there for family wraparound services. So if you had a kid who was coming and their mom didn't have a job, we had somebody who was coming to help you find a job. Because the beauty of the IndyMet, though, it was also partly funded by the Goodwill Foundation. So we were actually on the same campus where Goodwill, and so they invested. And many people know Goodwill has like job services and GED services. So this was a school that was designed to help whole families, not just the child that was going to that school, but the whole family. I mean, it was designed to where the teachers had to go do home visits. Like what schools do that, right? So because you really became a family.
Because you had the 15, right? This is with
Yes,
the 15.
exactly.
And you had them for 4 years.
For 4 years, right.
I
So
love
that
that.
became your family. I mean, I am still close to a lot of my students there, and they message me, and we're on Facebook, and now I'm looking at them, they have whole families and kids, and I feel like they're grandparent now to a lot of them. But you do, you know what I mean? And we become really close with them. And so that was the beauty of it, of supporting the whole child. Well, then from there, as I started to kind of grow that program, the big picture learning got further granting and started working in the larger small school movement. And we developed an organization called the Association for High School Innovation. Actually, at first it was Alternative High School Initiative. Then that term alternative throws people off sometimes, right? Do people think that when you say that, it's only you're looking for schools for students who mess up in trouble, and that's a part of it, but it also is parents sometimes just want alternatives, right? That's what we're talking about now in the current school choice conversation, is just, we just want some alternatives to what this traditional education may be. My kid is not fitting into this box, right? So I need to find something different. And so then, but to make the masses feel better, we started calling it the Association for High School Innovation, because then we were just trying to point that we're just saying it doesn't matter whether it's behavior issues, whether it's neurodivergence, whatever it is, we need innovative schools to support kids. And so then I went on to become the career and college coordinator for the entire network of small schools. And so there were like 258 schools in the network, different models. So I don't know if you've heard of like Diploma Plus, Street School Network, Gateway to College, Communities in Schools. You had your big picture learning schools. There were several others in there. And working with their then college counselors, what does it mean to have a good transition program and a good alumni support program? And so then, I know it's like a long story. After doing this work, grant funding went away. And then I went on, after that project ended, I started working at the higher ed level. And so then I was like, well, I think it's time to go back to college. And so I ended up going on and getting my doctorate in educational psychology, all the while still working in small schools. And so doing some some career development counseling at a community college in Indiana, which then connected me to other opportunities. Then I met my husband, moved to South Carolina. And because I was so connected to the small school movement, that's when I started to dig into more of like the charter schools and understanding law. And so my first work in the school choice space when I got to South Carolina, because I was also working in the foster care realm. But then I worked with the Public Charter School Alliance of South Carolina, which in helping to, I was their director of strategic coaching and mission development and helping to open schools here in the state, which then further got me connected with another organization, Parental Promise, who they wanted to start this initiative, My See Education, which was just the website at the time. And but the goal, because this was 10, 11 years ago, this is when South Carolina was trying to then get their ESA. So this was all a part of that combination. So their education savings account. And I said, and we know that a lot of times ESAs are very much for low income families, students with disabilities, military families. And in South Carolina, the low income families, the demographic is mostly African American families. And I knew that, getting connected was with them. And it was because we wanted to reach a broader audience. And I said, well, we need a separate organization in order to do this. And it needs to be nonpartisan, because a lot of times this in the school choice conversation, it becomes very politicized. It's a lot of the bills are initiated by Republicans and things like that. So this is where you start to feel some folks who feel marginalized and feel like they can't be a part of that conversation. And I wanted to kind of help break that barrier and say, we need to stop looking at it that way. It's a nonpartisan issue. So then I teamed up with them to start a nonprofit called My SC Education. And that's how I then got connected with National School Choice Week, right? There's a whole bunch that happened in there. How long did it take me to tell that story? So that's how I got connected with them. And at the time, National School Choice Awareness Foundation, and it's so funny, I work for these organizations that have these huge long names, right? But so NSCAP.
And you got them all in order too, haven't studied or nothing.
Listen, I've been working on that. NSCAP was called National School Choice Week at the time. And when it first started, because I think, you in this grassroots movement in this space, you know how it works. You start something, you think it's going to be this one time. You just use you're passionate about trying to help people. You don't know where it's going to go. Your very first expo wasn't sure what it was going to look like. And then all of a sudden you're having expos across the country and you're snowballing and you're moving. But that very first one, you just might think, oh, I have a passion for it. I just want to do something and see what happens. Well, the Gleason Family Foundation, that's what I think happened with National School Choice Week. I don't think they knew it was going to go beyond that first time. And then it picked up and people liked it and it started to grow and grow. And I think as it was growing, it became a full-fledged organization. But then people got confused. Is it the week or is it an organization? So National School Choice Week was the name of the organization and it was the name of the week. But since then, and this year has been 15 years of National School Choice Week, about 3 years ago, we started rebranding, and it's now officially National School Choice Awareness Foundation.
Okay.
And under that umbrella, we have National School Choice Week. We have School Choice Navigate Network. In there, we have our Conoce Tu Opciones Escolares, which is the Hispanic support side, and a whole bunch of other projects that we're developing within that to provide just, I guess, holistic support, resources, research in this space of school choice. We are adjacent to the political conversations, I say, because we really do try to stay nonpartisan, but we know when we're talking education, if we pay attention to what's going on in our country today, you can't talk education without talking politics a little bit. But we really do, as an organization, try to stay neutral in that and just support folks and saying there's room for everybody. So that's how I guess I kind of came to working with School Choice Week. But it all started with my own experience, my own passion of wanting to make sure that young Black girls like me had opportunities, because I had a lot of opportunities that had I not had these specialized programs, out of school time programs, it wouldn't have worked for me. So even when I was a counselor in the school, I designed the programs based on my own experiences, saying this is what worked for me, having Upward Bound, having mentors, being able to take pre-college classes. So I was approaching university saying, hey, have you ever thought about doing a summer program for high school kids? And some of them had it, and the ones who didn't, I worked with them. So let's build one. You know what I mean? So because we need our kids to be able to see these things and to touch and feel and visit. And then when people thought I was crazy when I said, yeah, I'm going to take 50 kids on a 7-school college tour for a whole week during spring break, I just need about 8 chaperones to come along with me. And they're like, what? I said, yeah, I'm gonna write a grant and we're gonna get it. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, because that's the kind of stuff that I did. The only reason why I was able to go to Canada and to DC and different places as a poor Black kid was because I was in these programs. And so that's where for me. And so now I guess at the heart of my passion for school choice and education is remembering the experiences that I had and how those contributed to who I am today and the work that I'm able to do and the education experiences that I had and the knowledge that I was able to build. It was all of those experiences that taught me to learn how to learn. And that's ultimately what it's about. It's like, I just want to help kids understand how to learn so they can be lifelong learners. So.
Indeed. Yeah, no, because you were an active student. Like, I feel like you were very active in your education in general. And was this parent led? Were your parents like, hey, you need to get in this program, you need to get in that? Did they have educational background themselves?
Yes and no. So my mom and my dad met at Upward Bound. So it was funny. My dad was one of the counselors and my mom was a student. So it was a little bit, but they ended up not finishing because they had me. So it wasn't, and Upward Bound was a very known thing in our community. But beyond that, no, it's like my mother, because she was a working single mom. So both of my parents did go to college for a couple of years. So it was always spoken to us, you need to do this, you need to get resources. I wouldn't say so much parent-led in terms of she knew where to find the resources. She knew that one place to point me, and then it was those support systems that helped me there. So she was like, I knew of Upward Bound because she was in Upward Bound. She pointed me in the direction. But I'm a Gen X kid, a kid of the 80s. Parents wasn't filling out forms and stuff for you back then. Parents weren't doing all those things. It was like I made my own doctor's appointments. We got on a city bus and we went and did it. So I was given the permission. I was told, you better go fill out your job permit. You better go fill out your thing. That's what it was.
You know how to find my name. You know how to find my name.
No, exactly. I'm like, Mom, I need you to fill out this permission slip. I gave you permission sign it. So because my parents, they worked, right? They was my single mom, parents had divorced. You know what I mean? She left before I went to school. She probably left the house at 4:00 in the morning and got home 6:00 at night. You know what I mean? So it was just kind of like me doing my thing, but there was parent support. And I appreciate her for that. She showed up when she could show up. And when she needed to show up, she would pick me up when she could and doing those things with the city bus. But she knew where to point me in the right direction for the people who could take all those extra steps to make sure. But I think I just had a different level of self-sufficiency. I think all of us did back then. That we just kind of, we knew how to navigate things. Because when I think about it, it was, once everything was filled out, here, I need your signature on here to approve me to go on this trip. Like the big stuff, you know what I mean? I need you to drop me off at the airport. We about to go here.
Look, this is where I'm about to be at.
No, seriously, that's what it was. But she did. She knew about Upward Bound because she was that. But technically, I was still a first-generation college student because she didn't finish school.
Okay.
But yeah.
Nice. No, that's an amazing journey. Like, you were so active. Like, I'm like, oh, I do nothing, girl. Look, I was whereas I saw lack, I withdrew. Look, I saw the lack and I withdrew as opposed to diving deeper and trying to, supplement and find. It was like, yeah, no, never mind. Don't even worry about it.
Some of that came from just my environment too. I guess we all just have our different sparks. I was motivated by trying to get out. I wanted to be away from South Bend, Indiana so bad. I was seeing, because I was that kid who, I loved academics. I loved being in the band and all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, at the time when I was doing it, because I was in all the educated stuff, I was called the Black white girl. And I'm like, that was the stigma back then, is that if you were a Black kid and you were too smart and all that, because in my community, South Bend looks so different than what it looks today. It wasn't that diverse, you know what I mean? Somebody had posted my fourth grade school picture. It was the class picture, and it was like 4 Black kids in that picture at the time. Now that same school would probably have 4 white kids in it. You know what I mean? So it was just different at that time. And so I was also then stigmatized as different and kind of bullied by my peers, my Black peers, for being involved in National Honor Society and doing those things. So for me, I was like, I don't care. I'm just going to leave all y'all behind. So that's why I really dug it. Right. And so that was my way out. I didn't know. And I'm glad, because I was also, my family encouraged that. Right. And even though I didn't have the Cosby family in terms of my mama wasn't a lawyer, my dad wasn't a doctor, all these different things, we had Cosby values, right? My grandmother always said, you're going to be somebody, you're going to leave, you're going to be my grandkid to do that. She probably told all the grandkids that, but I thought she was just telling me that I was going to be the doctor in the family and I was going to do that. I'm the one who took it to heart. And so it was always instilled to do that. And I knew, I was like, I got to make some money. In order for me to get out of here and to leave South Bend. So I did all the stuff that I thought was going to be looking good on a resume to get me accepted into the university. Some of my friends did a little bit of that and they got away. And then some people that just wasn't their push and motivation. But I had moments. It was one time and it was so crazy. I was on my way to a college tour. My mother was waking me up. We was going to drop me off in Notre Dame because we were going on like a spring break trip. The night before, the neighbors, so I lived in the hood. Neighbors had a party. I wake up, it's a dead man in the driveway. Kid you not. At the time, I didn't know he was just laying there. He had blood all over. Come to find out, he had a letter carved in his tongue and all this stuff. And it was so crazy that I was so desensitized to that, because I walked outside, I saw him, I walked away, I said, Mom, is somebody dead in the driveway? And she called she called the police. And then I finished packing my bags and we was
That's wild.
Right. So yes, I was like, I need to get away from this, because we knew, it was those kind of nights where, when somebody was doing something, sleep on the floor, sit on the floor, because we can hear gunshots. Like, that's the kind of environment I grew up in. And my high school was in walking distance. You could walk out on my front porch and see my high school across the street from there. And it was just a weird kind of space and place, because then on the side of the high school where I lived, that was like considered a hood. On the other side of the high school, that's where you had more affluent families. And it was just
But you didn't go there. You went to the school at by your grandmother's.
No, this was at this time though. By the time I got into high school, this was still the same zone school. South Bend, their zone. So it was an elementary and middle school where we moved to a different neighborhood, and I went use my grandmother's address. But by the time I got to high school, we moved back to that neighborhood. So I was actually closer. My grandmother's house was still within that school zone, but by high school, we actually moved across the street from high school.
Gotcha.
So yeah. So we didn't have to cheat on the address at that point. But yeah, so it was those kind of things that was happening. I was like,
I gotta get out of here.
I gotta get out of here, even though I'm not, too affected by it or whatever. But it was just like I need to go.
Yeah, I understand, because that's usually how it happens. Either you're gonna get swept into the cycle of it, or you're going to be empowered to make sure that your future is different. You want to break the cycle.
So yeah, and then I think, and it was at that time, that's where I started to find my voice though, as I guess my community made me, because my Black friends, family, who called me the Black white girl, really pushed me into, I don't want to say militancy, but then I was like, I felt some type of way about that, because I didn't fit. I wasn't white. So I was like, let me dig into my history. This is where I became a poet. This is where I became, I started to find my voice of just looking at what was wrong in the communities and things like that. So I started doing plays and all this kind of stuff. You couldn't tell me I wasn't like a Nikki Giovanni or somebody at the time. Like that's who I was like emulating and stuff. And so it just, but that's the beauty of connecting kids with something that they're passionate about. Yeah. That's the beauty of introducing them to something that it takes one little spark, and then all of a sudden they run with it. And that's why I like, out of school time programs and homeschool programs and places where they can get these other things. One of the college program that really triggered me into being, and I say I was blackety black, just because she had opened my eyes to a space and understanding of Black history that I had never been taught in school. But I had it was a 2-week program the summer before my freshman year in high school. It was at Ball State University. And it was only 2, and I had young scholar something, I don't know, something else I filled out, because I think my mother, she was like, oh, you going to this? And I was like, yeah, I found this program. And I will never, Maud Jennings was her name. And she read us the book. It was, or not even, she didn't read the book. She gave us, she was talking about African tradition of oration and things like that. And she told the story of the people who could fly. And then she got to the part in the book, and I ended up buying the actual children's book of it. And she ended up getting to the part where she was, and I don't know if you know that story, the people who could fly, and it's talking about how, so it was, they're out in the field, the slaves are being, picking cotton, being beat, all these kind of stuff. And it was a mother who had her baby on her back, and the baby kept crying, and the slave master comes and is like, shut that baby up, but she still got to keep picking the cotton, right? And he's like, shut the baby up. So then he whips the mother and the baby down in that time. I'm like abbreviating the story. And there was another man in the field, the slave, who he gets fed up with it, and he starts speaking the magical Yoruba words that all of a sudden the slaves start to ascend into the air and they're flying away. I mean, like really short abbreviation, but if anybody out there, go find the book, People Could Fly. But basically just talking about how it was the slaves who just said they had enough uprising and they ascended to heaven. Now, I know now as an adult what is really these stories we talk about where, they were jumping off the ship so they wouldn't have to go into slavery and things like that. But it just kind of, when she shared those African words, when she talked about, because it was a story of rising above, resilience, standing up to adversity, looking into that, it gave me so much strength and power in this 2-week program. And then the science teacher, Miss LeBron, Miss LeBaron, that's her name. Miss LeBaron, this isn't a science class, but then she introduces us to this book, and it was a book called The 5 Black Presidents. I said, huh? You know what I mean? And I was like, but she was pointing to presidents who may have had Black blood. We know how all that works, showing pictures that, they say Abraham Lincoln and all that, then telling the story of Jefferson and his Black kids and all these things. And my mind was just blown. I was like, what? They didn't teach us this? I was like, and then I was the worst kid to give this to, because I was that one that I'm going to put it in your face. So freshman year, get into high school, I'm fired up after this. I'm like, oh, I'm about to do all this stuff. Y'all know we powerful. But then I get back into my community, and they wanted to put it down. And I remember history class, the teacher asking everybody, so what do you want to learn? I said, are you going to teach us the book, The 5 Black Presidents? She was mad because I didn't have any Black teachers in high school. She threw the chalk across the room. How dare you talk of this stuff? How dare you bring up these lies and all? Yes. So here I am, freshman year old, emboldened
Not throwing
to get into
chalk though. What?
Yes, she did. Yes, she did. I'm fighting with the history teacher my freshman year. Then my English teacher, Mr. DeRue, I'm always say his name. I don't know if but it is what it is. He came to me and he said, why are Black girls so loud? Mind you, I'm in school at the time where the Rodney King beating, you know what I mean? OJ stuff, racial tension, LA riots. This is my era at the time that I'm in high school. And so then every assignment I do in his class at that point became about Black history. Maya Angelou, Langston Hughes were the poets that I was referencing, Toni Morrison, you know what I mean? And so I guess that's what it was. It was those sparks that gave me that. But I had the support of out of school time programs that when I would go to people, they gave me the courage to keep on pushing, to not retreat, to not hide my voice. And if I didn't have those kind of mentors and stuff in the community, I don't know where I'd be. But it was an interesting time.
You were a young activist. That's so dope. Like you not even knowing what you were doing, but that's what you were doing. That's dope.
Yeah. And so that's the drive for me with school choice. I don't know if people feel like that's the connection, but that's what I want people to see. And when we think about it and when we're shaping schools and the homeschool environment is so important, because even if you're not truly homeschooling your kids, you still need to homeschool your kids. Yes, my education came from but my mother, even though, no, was she sitting down going through work with me in that way? No, but I learned how to take care of house and home. I learned how to budget. I learned how to prioritize. I learned how to do, like, that was my education from my mom in that space. When I would go to the beauty shop, that was some education in those spaces. You know what I mean? When I would go, and so I think then as communities need to look at, so yeah, the school can do their part, but then there's other parts that we need to do. So stop even looking at homeschool as something separate. We should all be homeschooling. We should all be supplementing our children's
Indeed. Yes,
education, and
ma'am.
regardless of where we send them. So yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Let's speak on
Yeah.
choice though. What are some of the choices that parents have that they may not be so aware of? Like, even because I don't know if I shared with you before. I was in New York at a time, it was like 2 years ago, and I was talking to a parent in the park, and she was like, I didn't know we could still homeschool our kids after COVID. I thought that was just during that time. And so parents really aren't aware of their choices.
Yeah. And one of the big things, and I guess I'll plug our website because it is a really great website. I tell people to go to schoolchoiceweek.com, or you can go directly to myschoolchoice.com. And we have a navigate tool for parents where you can put that information in there, and you can select it by state. I think that's number one. The first thing is you really have to understand what's happening in your state, because I can talk about things that'll happen here in South Carolina, or I know Indiana very well because that's where I'm from, but it is very different. And so sometimes your state can pose a barrier, but that's where then you have to become that activist and say, okay, I like what's happening over there. How can we fix it? And sometimes it's not a matter of the state not wanting to do it. They just don't think of it and no one brought it to the table. But I think a lot of people may not know about homeschool because some states are just not homeschool friendly, and they shy away from it. They don't talk to parents about that. And I think too, when COVID happened, I had to really try to clarify for people, you aren't homeschooling, you're just schooling at home, right now. You're just supporting that, because a homeschool environment can and probably looks way different than what we were just trying to do with get our kids by with the packets and the worksheets and stuff. I mean, I know some people might set up their homeschool space like that, but most of the time that's not it. But I think number one, to know your options, you first kind of need to know a little bit about what's happening in your state, what you can do. But I do believe, though, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think homeschool is a non-option for anybody. I think any state, you should be able to register for homeschool, but then the process for that, like here in South Carolina, you have to pick one of the three options to be able to be listed as a homeschooler. So learning about those different things. But that's the first step. Research just what are out there, the basic models of choice, your homeschool, your micro schools, your virtual programs, your traditional education, your charter schools, private schools. And then sometimes people might even separate a private Christian or private Christian school to like a parochial school or Catholic school, separating those look a little different, or just even an independent school. And then you have some private virtual schools, you know what I mean? So there's a lot there, but I would even tell parents who, like, if you are in a traditional public school system, first look just at that district. What are your choices even within that option in those schools? Because I think people who oppose, those of us who talk about choice, think that we're trying to get people to leave the traditional public school system. And it's not that. I just want people to be aware of their choices and aware that, or have the feeling that they even chose the school that they were assigned to. You know what I mean? Like, do the work to step back and evaluate, if I did have a choice to start off with, would I even choose this particular school for my child? And I think that number one starts with, two, having a conversation with your child and evaluating your family. What does that look like? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that a lot of parents really sit and ask that question. Like, first of all, who is my kid? What do they need, really? And let me ask my child. And somebody I was on a conversation not too long ago, and they said, well, what's the earliest age you should start talking to your kids about school? So they can talk. I mean, I'm just like, because they can tell you. I mean, even my child, 2, 3 years old, I can ask them, what do you like to do? And, was it fun? And when I started putting them in daycare, my son started school 3K in a private school, you know what I mean? And just, did you like it and stuff? You can pick up on things, and they will let you know if they're enjoying it, if they're not, and what they're interested in and what they like to do. You got to know who your kid is. But I guess most often, maybe elementary, middle school, we really start looking at what it is, how they're learning, understanding the teaching environment and things. And then I think families need to consider themselves, like parents need to consider themselves within that choice. So does this work for you? Like if it's a charter school, can you all drive if they don't have bus transportation? Or the way that the school teaches, what is your ability to support that? Be careful, parents, about choosing a virtual program because yeah, it might be more convenient, or your child, they want to stay home, but you have to be involved in
Yes, I
that
was gonna say
process and
that
facilitate that.
requires you to be a bit active. It does.
Right, right. And there's nothing wrong with a parent because I know me. That's what I cannot homeschool. And you say y'all have heard
Yes,
me
and
for the
we
last
talked about
30.
it. I'm about to
Yeah, I mean, y'all have heard me for the last 30 minutes talk about how involved I'm in the school and all these things I like to do in the school. And I'm an educator. Yes, I think I skipped over that. I was a college professor for a while before I got here, and simultaneously, I mean, I think that's the thing that confuses people. I did a lot of simultaneous work. So I was a psychology professor for 5 years, and then an adjunct for many years, all the while the process. I am an educator. I love to teach. COVID did a number on me and I only had the one, because at the time we had a couple of high schoolers, but they were pretty self-sufficient. But my elementary age child during COVID, I said, oh no, he got to go back to school. I don't see how, because it was a different time in my life. And I think us parents, we need to look at that. And it's different when you're working with your own children. But that's when I also really realized this isn't homeschool. This is schooling at home. I think if I knew I was going to do a homeschool approach, my whole approach would have been different. We would have to build a culture of that learning and the process, because I realized too, my child wouldn't have been the one who can get up and sit as if he's at school and he's at home. And I think that's what people who are really homeschooled, you probably figured that out. Like, what is the best environment? How do y'all learn? What is the timing of the day? Because I was still trying to do, we waking up 8 o'clock, we gonna sit here till 3 o'clock.
But they didn't have a choice though. But they didn't have a this you're talking about when y'all were doing packets, not when they had started implementing
and then when the video stuff, that was also hard too. But this is at first, when they first started doing packets, those first couple of weeks before, because we didn't know we were gonna be on this extended schooling at home type situation. So I'm like, okay, we gonna do this. I got my projector out. I'm about to teach him just like we in the classroom.
Not the projector.
2 hours into this mess, I'm about go see the principal. This is what I'm telling my child. And the principal was his daddy. I'm like, you about to get in trouble. I was like, I can't do this no more. And I was like, and I was making, I said, yeah, we reinstituted paddling in school today. Because it was hard. I was like, oh no, I can't do this. This is, but I do realize, even if, like, that just wouldn't be my choice.
But I'm glad you're saying that though, and understanding your limit, because at no point do I ever want people to think that when we talk about choice or it's homeschooling in general, because my organization is Homeschool Yo Kids.
Yeah.
I'm never telling people who are not equipped, knowing that they, like, this is not for me. Sit in that emotion, understand that, but know that you still have to be a part of your children's education. That's my biggest thing. Like, by all means, I'm not expecting every family to go take their children out of traditional school. Please don't do that, especially if it's not for you. But understand that your child needs you to be a part of their educational journey, no matter the school placement. That is the big thing. But know your limits. Know your limits.
Yes, and I've learned them, and so. But I am a big advocate in my child's life, and obviously, I mean, I'm at the meetings, I go to the programs, I'm gonna sit in the school, and I'm gonna show up and do all those different things. I might even go and volunteer and say, let me do some lessons at the school and do all that. But I admire the teachers who, well, I can't say because I've been a teacher. It's just different. The homeschool parents, like I've been in all classes, K through 12. I taught kindergarten all the way up through higher ed. But it's just something about when it's just you and your own. For me.
Look, Doc. Yesterday, because we're in Florida, we with my family and stuff. I'm at my little sister house, and she yesterday we were talking. We was in the kitchen. She said, "Girl, I still can't get over. They don't go to no school. Like, you with them 365, 365." I said, "That's why I wake up early." She said, "I know, like, cause." How? Like, how? Because I mean,
Yes.
it is a thing. It's a lifestyle. It takes a lot, but it takes a lot of work than you too. So, but I get it all the time. Like, girl, you don't really? Like,
Yeah,
really?
I'd be like, I need a break. I need you to go. But I mean, and I love my child,
Exactly.
my kids, and I can't imagine if it was because we have 6 kids all together. I know there's families who do that with all of them. I'm like,
Yes, yes.
but I don't know. I guess sometimes it is easier to either be objective with other people's children, or and I'm a whole psychologist here, and I'll be trying to do the psychology on my own child. That don't work. Like, I know what I'm supposed to talk about. I teach parenting classes about being, whether or not to be a permissive parent and all these different things and how to do 13. And you try to employ that with your own children, and you feel like no, I mean, it works for the most part. I'm able to, but it just still, I like working with other people's children in that capacity. And when it comes to that, because I think when they're your own, and I don't know how you tend not to do that, we discipline different when they're our own versus when they're others. And so I'm like, how do you separate that? For you though, just out of curiosity, like when you're with your kids, do you feel like you are their educator or their mother? Is there a time where it ever shuts off, or it's just so blended and it's the same?
I feel like it's really blended, like really blended, because they ask me questions all day. They really do. Even last night, what did Morgan ask me? It was like 10 o'clock at night. We were watching something and she asked me something. And it's just like, just on a need to know basis, like, oh, okay, what is this? And I just answered it and went on about our way. But it's a blend. It really is. Cause my kids, they don't like my oldest girl. She don't even see me as, I feel like she think we peers at times. I really do. I think she
Really?
think we BFFs at always.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, but it's a blend. But I'd say it always, I had like, it's a growing in me and understanding of me. Like I went through a big transformation with this whole process of committing to homeschooling, because I was in the public school system and teaching other people kids, and I used to actually joke at like the first meetings, like faculty meetings at the beginning of the school year, but without the kids and stuff. I was like, okay, y'all, it's time to start ignoring our kids and teach other people kids. I used to joke about that every year. I used to say it all the time, because that's what it was. My babies had to go to daycare. They had to go to, preschool, all that good stuff. But prior to having kids, I knew I wanted to homeschool my kids. Like I knew that. I knew that. I knew that. I knew that. And so when the time presented itself, it was like, all right, let's step into it. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I ain't because I mean I've been on the phone with you at times and heard your little ladies in the background asking a question, and I do think it's beautiful that learning can happen at any time in any space. And so I still do those things. I just know that he has another place to go for the most part to do that. But that's how I approach. But I think as parents, that's how we should approach life. I mean, because people thought I was probably crazy because in the first 2 years of his life, he was mostly. I did send him to daycare for a little because I was working from home, and people were confused by that. Like first 6 months, I didn't work at all, but I kept him home, did take him daycare. But when I wanted to start doing some more work, and I was doing more consultant work, and I was still at home, and I was like, "Well, you work from home. Why are you sending your child to daycare?" I was like, "Well, number one, I can't get anything done when he's there because if he's crying and I'm on a meeting and that kind of thing." And it's a little difficult, but I also felt like there was some developmental things that he can get from being in an environment with other children, and his siblings were all older than him. His next closest sibling was 9 years apart. So I just wanted him to have that association and not being able to give it to him at the time. But it was limited hours in daycare. But I was, we would go to the grocery store and I'm talking to him, people looking at me like I'm weird because it's this, 9-month-old baby. And I'm like, avocado? Say that. What color is this? You know what I mean? And we're learning. And a lot of times I'm out in public and I do see the homeschool parents. And it's so funny to see that their lessons in action, you know what I mean? The ones who are really digging into it. And I would treat my son like that. I'm like, no, you're going to pay for this. This is how you swipe the card there. This is how you go up and ask. You need to order for yourself. And I think parents also need to see those are the moments. We could be driving in a car and you could name the type of clouds or, reading the signs and all those different things. Just on the way home yesterday or whatever day Friday, when I picked him up from school and I was, we always have a school today. What'd you do? Of course, he's a teenager and it was good. So I have to dig it out of him. It was all right. I'm like, well, what did you work on? We learned some stuff. What stuff? You know, I'm asking things. After a series of questions, I figured out that in English and language arts, they're working on argumentative essays. And so I do a mini lesson on that just in the car because I'm like, Eli, this is you right now, your conversation is the first step to writing your essay. And I ask you because I think then because he dating a little girl, he says, and the little friend, I mean, I know his little girlfriend. And I was like, well, what do you like about her? Because she's like me. What do you mean she's like you? Well, because we're alike. I said, but Eli, I was like, this is what I'm talking about. When you write a paper, I was like, you got to give me the topic sentence. You got to give me details. You got to fill in the blank. Give me some examples. You can't just make a statement. She's like, you like you how? And he's like, well, because we like the same things. Okay, again, you're not giving me enough. When you say we like the same things, same things like what? Yes. What are those things? Elaborate. And then, but it really did, in my mind, become this process of I need you to connect those dots and understand that even when you have conversation, your conversations are just like you're writing essays. And you need to think of it that way. You need to fill in the beginning, middle, and end and talk about it. And that's a lesson. And it's so funny because I could be doing that. And like when my mom is in the car, does anything have to be a lesson to you? Yes. And I'm like, yes. But I didn't realize that I was doing that. And I think that if we as parents can lean even more into that, there's lessons, and that's what I don't call it. That was something I learned along the way. They call it high yield learning opportunities. It was one of the big things, and something like working for the Boys and Girls Clubs, because I worked for them for about 10 years, that they teach in their work. That's what it's about, that kids don't always have to know and feel like they're sitting in a classroom to learn. We just need to find high yield learning opportunities to where they can have fun, but then also we could be teaching them some really strong lessons that are gonna stick with them later. So hopefully when my son goes back to school tomorrow and they're working and practicing these argumentative essays, he'll remember what we were talking about in the car on the way home.
Indeed. He will though. He will.
And I think he will. So yeah.
Yes.
That's the extent of my homeschooling.
But you homeschooling though. That's the thing though. Understand that. You homeschooling though.
I think so.
My thing with choice, and it's wild that it's been politicized because it's the weirdest thing that having a choice in education would be something that's political. I think that should just be a human right in general, because if something's not working for you in this avenue, then you should be able to veer off to another avenue that may be serving you better. So choice for me, and because I don't like to be told what to do, I always have to have a choice. Like I always you're not going to tell me I don't have a choice in something, because I'm a research enough to know that I have a choice. So choice is a big, big factor for me in everything. And so I love what you all are doing as far as ensuring that families are aware of their choices. How many events did y'all have this year?
Oh, now I knew I should have pulled up the exact number so I can give you the real statistic. Everybody, please go to schoolchoiceweek.com to get the exact number. But I do believe it was 27,000 different schools participated. We had 60 flagship events. I believe we had 30 school fairs, 12 capital rallies, like 9 student showcases. So there were several. I mean, several thousand people just celebrated and awareness on their own. It was one of our biggest years. This was 15 years of National School Choice Week. Several gubernatorial proclamations that were signed, and those are important. And I used to not think that signing the proclamations and little things like that made a difference. But it really just speaks to when a state and when the governor says, we are supporting this, we're supporting parents' rights and to choose, like you said, it's a right that we should have access, even though our country has not always looked at it. Education has always been weaponized, right? We as a community, education was held back from us and people knew the power of education. You know what I mean? And I think that's why education is so politicized, because it's a powerful thing. You know what I mean? When we know stuff, that is the weapon. And I think subconsciously people know that, and that's why it's being used within this game. You know what I mean? It's like the more you know, the more you grow. Yes, that's true. You know what I mean? And the more knowledge you have, and I am a walking testament, the more knowledge that I've gained, it directly equates to success and financial success and being able to live in this capitalistic society. You know what I mean? And so it does make a difference when you show that, we have the support of state. And that's basically saying You know, I mean, we're going to put some resources to that. It may not be perfect and all those different things, and the money may not always flow to everybody, but it's a starting point. So it was really great. I really love the work. Like you said, just being able to get information out there. I want people to know that School Choice Week, we're not telling anybody which is the best option. We just want to share with you all the resources. We like to connect with organizations like Homeschool Your Kids, different local state organizations. Say you connect with them to see what works for you. We're just going to give you as much information as we possibly can so that you can connect the dots for yourself. We can do some direct supports a little bit as best we can, but we mostly work with those partner organizations to do that. But I think, and no matter how many times I say, we're not trying to pit public school over anything else, or you know, vice versa, make people fight. People still believe that, because then you turn on the news and there's all these conversations and all this stuff in the Department of Ed issues and all these different things. But I want people to know that we support any type of choice. You just have to find what works for you, your kids, your family, and it's okay to hop around until you figure it out.
Indeed, I think it is the money that you know, kind of, you know, once people get to talking about, oh, the money about to leave the school, and oh, because of this, and like, you know, they tie things in like, oh, well, the money should follow the kid, or all the little money talk is when it's like, but y'all aren't talking about the child. Like, it's the thing, like, we know that how important a child's future is in general, like as far as shaping it and guiding them towards their greatness, but yet we'll have them sit in a classroom while their greatness is being drained out of them, knowing it's not the right fit for them. There are plenty of students that definitely prosper through traditional school, plenty, but then there's not. Then there's those ones, and I felt like it was more on a majority level where they just needed something different. They needed something, or they need supplement. They need something as far as like what works for them, because this lovely design is not for everyone.
It's just not. And it doesn't mean it's a bad design. I think that's what I need people to understand. By us saying that this design is not for everybody does not mean it's a bad design. Keep your design because it works for some, but be okay with the ones that it's not working for, to find the other space. I think if we could broadly accept that throughout the country, the system would be so much better. The system would be easy because everybody's finding a place. I even want teachers to understand that. Quit feeling like you have to go teach in a public school. Quit feeling like you have, you know what I mean? You could start your micro school. You could run a homeschool co-op. You could be at a private school. Maybe you need smaller class size. Instead of saying, is something wrong with the kids? Is it something wrong with you in this environment? I'm not saying that you're a bad teacher. This might not be the environment for you. And I've seen that happen where I've also worked with teachers. And when I go in and do, because I get consultants sometimes to come in and do teacher training and stuff. And I've had conversations with teachers. I'm like, is this really the best fit for you? Like, I feel like just after meeting somebody, I'm like, I think you would thrive in this other type of environment and you might be happier. And I think we all just need to look at it that way, even from administration. You know, there's some administrators that might do better at more of an early childhood environment versus administrators who, you know, sometimes you got to be tougher when you're in these high school or middle school environments. And we just don't approach it that way. But I think that by and large, we are all just products of our society and products of capitalism. And when you start talking the money, that's where the capitalism and the greed and all those things, and you know, being and I know I get accused sometimes of being too much, you know, the socialist and all these different things and want to support and help people, and you know, so I try to steer away from that. But I'm like, it's my moral compass that's driving me, you know what I mean? And so if that's what it sounds like to you, I don't know what to tell you, know what to do, and y'all try to put that a label on it in a box. But morally, I'm like, if I have enough and I'm sustained, I'm gonna give the rest to somebody else. I don't need more than what I need. You know what I mean? And so, but unfortunately, you know, that's the fight that we're in. And so we just got to figure out how to survive within this space. Because I mean, I think it's getting better with these conversations. And when we come to the politics and as more and more grow, but I think there's always going to be this piece of, you know, you can't please everybody. It's always going to be a bit of a fight in the education space. But I do think that we a lot better than in the past.
Indeed, I agree. I just feel like choice is just healthy. Look, it's just healthy. Okay,
It's
it's healthier,
healthy.
and we
We
should
all
want a
have choice.
healthier nation. You should want a healthier nation.
Exactly.
Like, uh-huh.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
I
How do
mean,
you?
I always, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, because
I
this
was just
is
gonna
totally
say that
different.
I was gonna say just the example, just like when you want to go to the grocery store, I'm gonna get mad if it's only one brand of something that I can choose from. I need to be able to look at the different brands and to compare to see which is gonna be better. I need to be able to read each label and based on what I'm trying to fill my body with at that time, which is gonna give me the best nutritional value for what I'm looking for. So it's like same concept with choosing
Indeed,
food,
indeed
but
it
yeah.
is. And then this want to segue into how do you self-care? Because I feel like self-care is such a just a important conversation. So I made it a point to start asking all my
Yes.
guests, how do you
Yes.
self-care?
Oh, I have a lot because I'm a firm believer in that. And as a psychologist first, and just and a very spiritual person, I have a motto that I say I got to do one good thing for myself every day. Something that's just
Mm.
exclusively for me. And I don't care if that's going to buy my favorite pack of gum. I don't care if that's just taking a moment to just sit, breathe, listen to my favorite song. Like those are the daily things that I do. I mean, I wake up with affirmations and, it's going to be a great day. And I say prayers and a mini meditation in my head just as I'm waking up. And those are just little things. But there's moments where I need to, for real, decompress to walk away. I am a writer, so I love to write. I love to read. So getting that good book and sitting and reading and going out. But I also very much into physical fitness and exercise. Like after I get off today with you, I'm probably gonna go and do a little bit in our home gym. So physical fitness is important for me. I mean, I think it just for me, my self care depends on my mood and what I need at that time. Sometimes it might be I need a girls' night out and I need to just go hang with my friends and we need to talk. And so we'll go do that. Sometimes it's, my husband and I, we have a very routine date night. Like we're serious about that and non-negotiable time
Aw.
is so it's like every week. So we have our time, but then there's times where we need to do even something different where it's like, okay, we gotta go, we gotta take a trip, we need to get away from here and even get away from the house. So I do, it's just being intentional, but listening to yourself. I have to really think about what's happening with me in that moment. So am I stressed because of work? Because the decompression might look a little different because of work decompression. You know what I mean? So we automatically get that first week after National School Choice Week off. And
Mhm.
I did not turn on the computer whatsoever.
Good
I was like,
job.
I'm staying
Yes.
away. It was hard, it was hard. Because then it was coming through the messages is coming on my phone. I was like, ignore, I got 100 in my inbox right now, but I'm gonna pretend I don't see that. So my self-care sometimes is talking to myself. But I love to travel. So not as much as you. I'm not out there. I don't have the ability to go as much as you. But just finding those moments. So I think self-care starts with listening to yourself in that moment and identifying that. But probably even before that, because I know I talk to people a lot because self-care is huge with me too. And they're like, I don't know what I like and all that. Maybe it's you got to do a self-evaluation. What are your hobbies? Develop
Yes.
that, figure that out.
Get
Sometimes
back
it's
to
just me.
you.
Yeah, I love puzzles. People think that's weird. I'm old school
I
jigsaw
like puzzles
puzzles.
too. It makes you
I
sit
got some.
still. Like it makes you sit
Yes,
still. And you only focusing on that puzzle too. Like it's like,
yes.
I love that.
Oh, I love puzzles. So I will do that. And people think I puzzles and crocheting. And I will sit sometimes, I'm like, leave me alone. I got my puzzle, I'm putting it together, I'm focused, but I get so much thinking done or non-thinking. It's just a
Yeah.
moment to just be present with my puzzle. I don't know why they
Yes.
give me so much joy. And when it's done, it's like this, it's like the endorphins release. I don't know.
Yes.
People who don't puzzle, y'all need to puzzle. Because when you
Right.
sit and you finish it, and it's like, look at this masterpiece that I put together. I'm like,
Right. No,
I
no,
love
I
it.
totally agree. I love puzzle. I haven't done one in a while, but yes, I
Yeah.
love anything that gets me to just sit and just be
Yep.
like you said,
Yep.
present. I like to be present. That's been my thing since 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Being present. Like
Yep.
I'm not over there. I'm not next week. I'm not 2 weeks from now. I'm not 2 years from now. I'm present.
Yes.
That's
I think
very
that's how you
important
keep
for
your
me.
anxiety low.
Yes,
And I've
ma'am.
learned that. Yes. It's just because the world stuff is gonna keep happening,
Yes,
right? It's gonna
ma'am.
be chaos around you. It'll be there when you get to it. You
Yes,
gotta
ma'am.
teach yourself to just one chunk at a time, focus on this. Now I can go focus on that. Now I can go focus on it. You know what I mean? And quit being all over the place. So yeah.
Yes, ma'am. And before I let you go, 3 things. Like, hey, if you ain't hear nothing else, hear this. 3 things you would tell parents. Just whatever that may be.
3 things that I would tell parents. Listen to your children, right? Listen, not just hear what they're saying, but really listen and try to dig into what does it mean when they're saying what they say. You know what I mean? My son said something pointed because I was asking him sometimes why does he give one word responses when he talks to adults? Because because when I hear him on with his friends
Talking up
and
a
he
storm.
talking up a storm, he said, I said, he said it's just a little awkward talking to adults. I don't feel like I can relate to them. That spoke to me to say I need to think about how I'm talking to him. What is it that he doesn't feel like he can relate to? Because I need him to feel like he can relate to some adults because that needs to be a safe space. So I had to hear him and what does that mean behind that? And when I'm listening to his words, then reflecting on different times where what does that mean and how can I make adjustments? So listen to your children, listen to yourself, right? It's okay for you to have to say no sometimes to our kids or not be able to make a choice because it may not work for you. Because you, just like on the airplane, we got to be good first before we can help the person next to us. So even if you might sometimes see that option as the better option for your child, if it does not fit into your life at that moment and it's going to cause you a whole bunch of stress and it's going to be too difficult for y'all to make it work, figure something else out. You know what I mean? Or let's talk about it, but listen to yourself and what you can and cannot really do.
Yes.
And visit schoolchoiceweek.com.
Yes, please,
Visit
please do.
schoolchoiceweek.com to get resources. No, but seriously, and just to see, there's a lot of just things out there that you may not know about it, and organizations that are just doing some fantastic work throughout the country, and just it'll help you kind of don't. I guess when I say that though, maybe that really means do the research for yourself. Like there's a lot of stuff. Even me, I've spewed some things, said some stuff. Fact check it. It's okay to double check, to check a few different resources. Don't just immediately listen to the rhetoric that's out there about school choice and all that. Find out information for yourself before you make a decision and say, "Well, they said." Who's they? You know what I mean? So I guess so beyond just listen to yourself from an emotional standpoint and cognitively, listen to yourself when it's read and look for your own eyes because I don't know who they are. Right. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Thank you so much for all of that. Thank you. Like this has been a very I knew it was gonna be great anyways. And the hour flew by. So it's like
yeah. I can talk a lot. We can talk a lot. I like talking to you though, Jay. I mean, I love the work that you do. I'm so happy that we connected, that you came across, and it's just been a great a professional friendship, but also developing into just a friendship. I mean, I think that the work you do, I admire that, and you definitely are important in this space, particularly the homeschool space, but the school choice space, and you have a lot to offer to families, and so just. We're going to always really, support you and share as much as we can. And, you've been my first go-to when people say, well, homeschool, well, and I have somebody that I am trying to connect to some things. So making some direct introductions as well. Just how do I get into this thing? What do I do? What do I need to know? All these different things. So I appreciate you being such a wonderful resource and being able to say it from personal experience. This is what it looks like. Yes. So that's super valuable to people who aren't resistant to homeschool because it don't work for me, but I know there's a whole bunch of people who it works. And I do. I admire it. I envy it. I was talking to my husband about it, just like, man, I wish I could. Can we just travel and go and be somewhere else every month and that kind of thing and learn because, you know what I mean? But so, yes, I do appreciate the example that you set.
Thank you. Thank you. Y'all be trying to make me cry up here sometimes. But thank you. I appreciate it because like these conversations are so empowering for me, myself personally. I love to talk to other people who are doing the work and being a part of the solution because, we identify problems all the time, but it's like very few that want to take time to actually really talk about the solution. So I appreciate this platform for that reason because every time I'm like more energized, more ready to go do something else. Like, all right, let's keep it moving because all things come together for the greater good. So I appreciate you just as much as you appreciate me. And I just want people to know that there's choices, love. Like I never want anyone to feel railroaded into something that is not helping you to be your best self. helping your children to be their reach their highest self. Our purpose is important and we all have one. So tap into that and understand that the resources are available. This is not a journey that you have to do alone in any kind of educational aspect. You will always have support. So seek it. And if you have questions, of course, you always reach out to me because I love researching. I love learning new things and I love finding resources for parents to effectively guide their children, because our children are the future, and they're going to be as dope as we tell them, and make them and help them to believe and confidently move in themselves. So yes, but always and forever, homeschool your kids.